Good afternoon. Welcome to the Space Resiliency Leveraging Commercial Innovation to Advance the Mission virtual event. Before we begin the program, a message from our sponsor.
Space is vast. Space is fast. Space is evolving. Space is congested. Space is contested. Space is hard. You must move fast to stay ahead of threats. You need to be lean, agile, all digital, responsive, and resilient. SAIC will help.
Now, please welcome INSA Executive Vice President, John Doyen.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We have an incredible lineup of speakers ready to discuss the ways their agencies are leveraging commercial innovation to advance the mission. Before we begin, we ask that when you have questions, you submit them through the questions box on the right side of your screen. Our moderator will do his best to get to all of your questions. Now I'd like to thank our sponsor partners, SAIC, Sims Software, and Strongbox Cyber Solutions. We could not produce these types of events without partner support. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a long-standing friend of INSA's, Michael LaRouche, President for National Security and Space at SAIC, who will introduce our moderator. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, John. On behalf of SAIC, thank you for your leadership and all the work INSA has been doing to foster these important discussions. I'm a big advocate for space resiliency, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have a part in today's presentation. I met our moderator last week at the INSA dinner, and I can tell you he is passionate about space resiliency. Bishop Garrison is INSA's Vice President for Policy, a position he started just 3 short months ago. In this capacity, he is responsible for leading INSA's councils, task forces, and other member-driven groups. Bishop is a seasoned national security executive, veteran, and writer. He has more than 2 decades of experience in the public and private sector, including leadership positions in presidential administrations and campaigns, nonprofits, and an AI startup. In government, he served at the DoD and DHS. I welcome you, Bishop, and I'll hand it off over to you. Thank you.
Seems like I was muted on that. I apologize. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to SAIC for everything that you've done for INSA and for the intelligence community here over the past years. My name, as you mentioned, is Bishop Garrison. I'm very excited to be here today. We have a very exciting panel discussing space resiliency with some esteemed members of the government that work directly on this issue. We know just from seeing how many of you have signed up for this that there is a lot of great enthusiasm and excitement around this topic. So I know you didn't come here to listen to me, you came here to hear from the panelists. So first, I want to introduce Jeremy Leader, who is with the United States Space Force. Next, we have Frank Avila, who is with NGA, and finally, Pete Muend, who's coming from NRO. So Jeremy, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll go to the next panelist.
Great, I appreciate it, Bishop, and I appreciate INSA for having be part of this. It's very interesting times, and and I'm just excited to be a part of it. I know the Space Force is kind of moving out on a couple different initiatives, but definitely looking at some of the path that the NRO and NGA have laid out already. It's an interesting time. So Jeremy Leader, I'm currently the Deputy Director of the Commercial Space Office, which falls under Space Systems Command, which is one of the 3 field commands in the United States Space Force. So I work for Lieutenant General Gutlein out in Los Angeles until he moves to his next position. I know there's a lot of nominations kind of on hold right now, so we'll just God doesn't go away if nominations don't go through. So we just got to keep pressing along with that. But yeah, the mindset is exploit what we have, buy what we can, and build only what we must. So I was charged with, get after that buy what we can aspect and understand what commercial can really provide. And I'm looking forward to talking about some of that this afternoon with you all.
Thank you. And Frank, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Bishop. I want to first start thanking INSA and then SAIC for hosting this event and inviting me. I think it's a great topic that we're going to be discussing today, and I'm excited to be here with my key mission partners, NRO and U.S. Space Force. So I'm Frank Avila, currently the Acting Director of the Commercial Operations Group at NGA, where I'm focused on solving national security mission challenges with innovative commercial GEOINT solutions. A big chunk of our job is really surveying the current geospatial market sector, looking for innovative capabilities and solutions that meet the customer needs, identify the most promising candidates of the solutions that we discover, and then facilitate their adoption and integration within the greater GEOINT enterprise. And one of the things that we do is really gather requirements from across the community to ensure that we drive unity of effort, transparency in the kinds of things we buy, and then drive efficiency to ensure that we are getting solutions that can meet some of the mission requirements from across the community, and collaborating with our mission partners across the NSG, both IC, UD, and the federal civil sector, to ensure that we minimize redundancy and ensure that we're making the best procurements on behalf of the U.S. government. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we're over to you, Pete.
All right, thanks for the introduction, Bishop. Great to meet you, and happy to be here with my colleagues and friends at both Space Force and NGA. Yeah, so I'm Pete Muend. I'm the director of NRO's Commercial Systems Program Office. That's the office in the NRO charged to buy the commercial imagery and other types of remote sensing data on behalf of the department, the intelligence community, and frankly, in large part, the broader FedCiv sector as well. Obviously, that, like everything we do, is a team effort alongside our partners, in particular on the NGA side for GEOINT, Space Force as it pertains to the space environment, NSA on the commercial remote sensing side, and like I said, all the other partners that we have, not to mention industry at the least. So it's certainly an exciting time to be here, working with the commercial remote sensing industry, the commercial space industry generally. It's exciting, but it's also, as everything, and kind of back to the theme of this panel, it's getting to be a more difficult job as time goes by, a more difficult job principally from our adversaries, more difficult for us and more difficult for our commercial partners as well. So I think it's a great and very timely topic.
Thank you, and thank you again to all 3 of you gentlemen for joining. I know how busy your schedule is right now, so we greatly appreciate it. So Pete, that's I think a great pivot right into our first question here. So when we talk about, and to be clear, probably the easiest question to answer, what are some of the most pressing threats when we talk about space resiliency, really? What are the most pressing threats as it pertains to the space resiliency and protecting space assets?
Yeah, absolutely. So space is definitely an extremely contested environment, and it's only getting more so. That's true not only for government systems operating in space, but for our commercial systems as well. We all operate in that very same domain. It goes without saying the principal threats and I'll say adversary actors in that domain are Russia and China. That's where we see a lot of the difficulty moving forward. I do want to emphasize it's not just threats in space though that we're worried about. It's certainly the space domain itself is a big part of it. But when we look at the larger threat surface, it spans as NGA will say from seabed to space. And in particular, I'd highlight the cyber domain. That's one of the things that we probably worry most about. certainly there's the counter space things, but there's also all the cyber threats that we worry about. There's a lot of different ways that we try to approach the problem. A big part of it is just diversity. That's certainly true of government systems, as we're proliferating our government classified assets and satellites up in space. But a big part of that too is appropriately leveraging our commercial partners and their satellites and their capabilities in space as part of a larger diversified hybrid architecture, if you will. So I think just that diversity and different lanes of communication, the different capabilities, and just I'll say all the different aspects that brings to bear, to allow us to better do our mission, I think are really, really important. So that's an important part of the diversity side of it. But as I said, we're also worried in particular on the cyber side. And we spend a lot of time and effort, in particular with NSA and especially our partners at NGA, creating a cybersecurity strategy that does a few things as we try to interact with our commercial partners, realizing kind of the unique threat environment that they're operating in there as well. One of them is, frankly, we want to preserve their commercial aspect, right? We don't want to turn them all into like SCI government systems. We want to make sure that they can continue to operate as an agile commercial enterprise. But at the same time, we also want them to adopt reasonable and prudent cybersecurity measures as well. So, we are asking them to do things. There's actually a three-tiered strategy that we constructed that at the very lowest level, asking them to adopt basically the bare minimum of cybersecurity controls to hold the federal government contract, middle layer, and then, up to a larger secure provider as well. And that's been really powerful, and in particular has allowed us to think through a priori. What sort of missions, what sort of tasks and orders are we willing to ask each of these provider types to do to make sure we can make maximum use of I'll say different levels of assurance, but all very constructively as part of that larger hybrid architecture. And that ties back into the resiliency and diversity side of it as well, making sure we can really make effective use of all those collection mechanisms.
Fantastic, and thank you for giving us a good foundation here, I think, to kind of build on a topic, because you're talking about threats and you're talking about the potential of cybersecurity controls and what we can do with partners. So Jeremy, coming kind of back on that and feeding off of that theme, what role do our industry partners play in protecting space assets and American interests here, is kind of to feed off of what Pete laid out, and what successes have we seen in recent years around?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I'll say that the what role that the Space Force and or the government has to play in terms of protect and defend for commercial assets. I think that's one of those questions that's still being played out. I know we recently had some CASR, or Civil Augmented Space Reserve, which is kind of like craft for space. We had a couple industry days here recently talking about the range from indemnification to war risk insurance, et cetera. Like what is that role? And I just think that the debate is still being had, and we're hoping to kind of parse out some of the details there for what that role is. But obviously, it's a partnership one way or the other, and we want to be as transparent as possible and make sure that we have the clearest expectation management as we possibly can when it comes to our commercial partners. I think that's, again, one of those things that we want to set ourselves apart from China, and be a partner of choice, and understand that, it is a partnership. We're not just going to come along and, start taking over stuff whenever it suits our needs, the way, an adversary might with their air quote commercial industry. So we, TBD on what that role is, but we definitely know that there's something there, and we just have to work through some of those details. But I will say, when we talk about pressing threats, it's not just the external threats that we typically think about. The China, Russia, obviously they kind of come to the forefront right out of the gate, but it's also some of those in some of our own internal processes. I think are part of that threatscape too. And getting after some of those pieces. I know Mr. Calvelli, the senior acquisition executive for Space Force, the Department of the Air Force, Space Force, delivering capabilities faster. And if we can do that both on the commercial and the government end, it drives certain things, certain aspects into that threatscape. So, if we hem and haw and take 20 to 10 to 20 years to deliver systems, you know, Russia and China aren't the biggest threats. You know, we're delivering, potentially delivering yesterday's technology tomorrow, and it's late to need. So we just need to make sure that we're constantly refreshing and constantly being able to modernize and push out those new capabilities, commercial, government, you know, either or.
Hey, Bishop, if I can add, you know, I think collaboration with our industry partners is key, and communication, you know, it's key as we both proceed, you know, in this contested environment. From a pressing threats perspective, you know, space underpins our national security and ability to respond decisively to crises around the world. I think that goes for both NRO and Space Force and some of our other NSG industry or community partners. Information collected from space and space platforms really informs national decision makers about evolving threats to U.S., our allied and partner interests around the world. And the intensifying strategic competition today presents really a serious threat to U.S. national security interests, including in space, sort of the new frontier, if you will. Military doctrines of competitor nations really identify space as a critical to modern warfare and view the use of counter space capabilities as a means to both to reduce U.S. military effectiveness and to win future wars. So, you know, going back to sort of my initial statement, I think communication between us and our industry partners is going to be key as we proceed in this new sort of environment that we find ourselves in. And just like Pete mentioned, you know, diversifying and increasing resiliency, that's one of the reasons why NGA is really looking at the totality of the different solutions that our industries providing today, not only from space systems, but also analytical solutions that fuses all of that information. One is diversifying the kinds of solutions that we're procuring nowadays, but at the same time, sort of increasing the resiliency, you know, with that market sector. So if something were to go down, at least we have something to back on or use as another solution that may fit the needs that we have. So really diversifying, you know, it's key for us as we move forward.
Fantastic. And Pete, I want to give you a chance here too, kind of on the same topic. How can industry and government better collaborate to support space operations? Kind of if you have anything to add to what Frank.
Yeah, certainly do. I think, as you know, and as we kind of alluded to before, we have a long history working with the Air Force, now the Space Force, NGA, and our other interagency partners, kind of in the space domain. That's just ever increasing, especially as we take more and more advantage of the commercial sector on our side. You know, with some of the more raw data, working with the analytic partners on the NGA side, and then working, you know, on the space domain side with Space Force. So that's just continuing to build and do more. And I really resonate with Frank's comments about communication. As space is getting more and more contested, though, I think we can continue to do more, and we can always do better. And one thing in particular that I'd like to highlight is last month, the directors of NRO and NGA and the commander of U.S. Space Command signed what we creatively called a Tri-SEAL strategic framework to really put in place some evolving roles and responsibilities, and writing down some things that we all frankly have to do a little bit better together as it pertains to the commercial side. In particular, there were three main areas that we talked about. One is providing threat information to the commercial sector, anomaly investigation and response, and then collection strategies as well. You know, and in terms of providing threat information, you know, we're looking to Space Command to really be able to relay on behalf of the interagency and the executive branch the threats that are out there, not only at the classified level, but all the way down to and including the unclassified level. For anomaly investigation and response, one of the things that we did, and it's spoken about in this framework as well, is making sure that everybody that we have on contract is obligated to tell the government, multiple parties across the government, if they see any and notice any counter space activities, you know, things like jamming, for instance, or anything else in that same vein. So, you know, within 2 hours, I think they have to be able to tell us, and then that allows us, of course, to lead an investigation, and that turns back to Space Command to say, okay, you know, was that a purposeful event? You know, what are the actions? Obviously, pulling in a lot of expertise across the interagencies to move that forward, and then finally working hand in hand closely with NGA, making sure that our collection strategies are well informed by the threat landscape as well. So really glad that's documented and allows us, I think, to take some much needed steps toward the future. But I would also highlight that's only a first step, right? There's a lot more that can be done. As Jeremy alluded to, on the protect and defend side, making sure we really understand, what the executive branch is doing, what commercial is doing, and making sure we can all move forward together. But it is at least a good first step.
That's fantastic, and thank all of you for your thoughtful responses here. Jeremy, before we kind of leave this thread of industry collaboration, I wanted to come back to one last piece here with you, and just kind of ask how can risk regarding these types of projects be better balanced to support innovation? When we're talking about, we're still trying to kind of, in your words, the role of industry is to be determined to some degree. But we know, as you and as Frank and Pete have laid out, that their collaborative efforts with industry and government in this space are pivotal. So how can the risk of some of these types of projects that industry takes on, how can it be better balanced with support of innovation?
Yeah, so balance is an interesting term, but I would say that there's an element, this kind of gets to the term of resilience and what do we mean by that. So there's not a lot of good metrics out there that exist today for what is resilience. So I think a lot of times the space folks focus only on the space layer versus the actual capability, and it's really both. But I would say, like, back to what Frank said about communication, it's understanding what commercial is doing with or without the government, and understanding where the government's needs are, and making sure that those are clearly communicated to commercial, so that if they are in some phase of development, that they can make the tweaks and adjustments to still meet their commercial customer needs, but at the same time potentially have that dual use capability for the government. Sometimes it's there's win-wins to be had, and sometimes there's a Rubicon that they have to choose between, I'm sorry, I'm going to just do commercial, and peace, more power to them, and we wish them all the success in the world. But at the same time, it just needs to be clear and understood what those different pressure points are. And I will say, it's kind of been interesting looking back on when we look at programs that we are currently building within the Space Force, and we say, how did we get to here, right? Like, when that buy build decision was made, how did we get here? And a lot of times you can peel the layers of the onion back and go back to some requirements that drive us to a certain path. And so we're taking a very close look at how we develop those requirements and percolating them back to problem statements to be able to, maybe there's a better way to solve some of these problems that commercial can provide a percentage of the solution, even in partial, there's some value there, even if they can't meet the requirement in whole. So I think there's an element of, again, commercial changing some of their pathways, and then there's an element of the government looking back at ourselves and changing some of our requirements to be a bit more inclusive.
Fantastic, thank you. So kind of off the tail end of that, let's move on a bit to capability. So this one for you, Frank, to start us off. What capabilities from industry partners have been the most valuable, and what do you think could actually stand to change a bit?
Thanks for that question. So one of the things that NGA has been focusing quite a bit is really going after solutions that fuse a lot of the commercial geospatial information available today. So not only commercial imagery, but commercial radio frequency, locational data, social media information. There's a lot of unclassified information available out there today, and the solutions we're going after are the ones that fuse a lot of that information and then start providing us insights and knowledge about activities that we may be pursuing and monitoring. So some of the solutions that have been really valuable are the ones that have started incorporating automated AI/ML-based kinds of applications to go after monitoring of activities, patterns of activities at key installations, military airfields, maritime ports, and things like that. So it's really benefiting from all of the volume of data that's available out there, and really getting to some of the more valuable information that our analysts need from across the community to really start making judgments and insights in what's going on at facilities of interest. So certainly we're leveraging the information and the data that Pete's component, it's procuring, but we're really moving sort of the higher level of information, if you will, to buy some of that. One of the areas that we've been focusing quite a bit on is, to support climate security, is looking at how do we monitor greenhouse gas emissions gases around the world, and exploiting some of the data that's available out there, some of the analytical solutions that are already mapping those kinds of environmental threats, if you will, going on around the world. So those analytical solutions are ones that we have been finding valuable to support some of our mission requirements, and that's kind of the area that we've been focusing more and more to start bringing into the community and exposing some of those solutions to the greater GEOINT enterprise.
And Pete, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to actually the Russia's invasion and actions in Ukraine. I think that's been, as tragic as that is, and it's been incredibly tragic. It's also been a great laboratory to really demonstrate what commercial data can do, and our commercial providers can step up to. In particular, since the early days of the invasion, actually even before, we were collecting extensively over Ukraine, sharing that with our allies and partners. And we've certainly learned a lot of lessons along that way, in particular with regard to dissemination and getting the data, as far forward as we possibly can. But I think in particular, the unclassified nature of commercial data is incredibly powerful and has resulted in just unprecedented amounts of sharing. Like I said, we've certainly learned a lot of lessons along the way, back to the dissemination side, and then as Frank mentioned, a lot of the fusion and making sure we can extract as much value as we possibly can to make sure that data is as actionable as it possibly can be. So I think that's all goodness and all things we can do more on. A little bit more on the collection side itself and the remote sensing data itself. Obviously latency is always key in order to make data that much more usable and actionable. Getting it down quickly and getting it in the hands of those who can actually make decisions and take action is really important. So so that sort of timeliness is a very important aspect of it, as well as quality. And frankly, across both of those items, I think the classic more I'll say government management sort of statement. The biggest thing that I could harken back to is making sure that as we work with our commercial providers, right, they're delivering on all their contractual commitments, right? They're standing up, stepping forward, leaning forward, and we certainly have seen that, but also just in a contractual sense, meeting everything that they signed up to and continuing to. That's how we all move forward well together.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I want to give you a chance on this question as well, just in case you have any thoughts here about capabilities. I'm going to ask you on all of them. No, just about this one in particular, because we're talking about capabilities, and you've mentioned a lot about partners and in dealing with delivering capabilities in a timely fashion. So, so any additional thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some Space Force leadership who's talked about being able to meet combatant commanders' needs in a timely fashion is a priority, and I think we understand that we're part of, again, this team, this intelligence community team, to provide some of those capabilities. And when we come up with solutions, that they have to be able to integrate with the existing intelligence community processes. Whereas we may focus a lot more on that timeliness piece that Pete was talking about versus kind of the more strategic intel, processing piece. I think there's a couple of win-wins to be had here. So as we work at developing these, we call it SRT versus ISR, so surveillance, reconnaissance, and tracking. And the big difference between that and ISR is really focusing on that timeliness piece. But as we, push for those types of solution sets to be able to collect things in a timely manner, the more commercial capabilities that we can bring into that fold, the better we can carve out that timeliness gap, and at the same time be able to push those products back to the NGA, so other users can use those other than just the tactical person who's requesting it. So it's an interesting problem set, but I think we're all on board to try to figure out a solution together to fix some of that.
Bishop, if I could add, feeding off of what Jeremy just said, I think timeliness, yeah, it's really important. The partners that we support, they're always challenging us on, how quickly can we get information, intelligence, insights, from the time of imaging to the time where it gets to an operator that now they can act on that information that they've received. So that's a big challenge for us right now. It's cutting those timelines down. As we have seen, and we continue to see, the number of modalities and phenomenologies that the commercial sector is introducing from a remote sensing perspective. For me, being an image scientist, it's really exciting to see all these new modalities that are now being introduced. Is, how do we start using those as kind of a virtual constellation to really improve the periodicity and the timelines, and also, to start looking at cross-sensor tip-off and cross-modality tip-off. We have radio frequency systems now. We have multispectral, hyperspectral. It's beginning to evolve. Commercial thermal is sort of beginning to emerge. Hopefully, in a few years, we're going to start seeing commercial space-based LiDAR. So how do we start tipping and queuing, across those different modalities to really cut down then on those timelines? I think it's going to be important, and leveraging the kinds of communication layers that Spacecom is now putting in space, and how can industry leverage that to really cut those timelines down? I think that's where government and industry can start working together and really become more efficient with the kinds of solutions that they're developing and how we're beginning to use them and incorporate them.
Thank you so much to both of you for that. So moving along to a related question in part, but how do we make space operations more cost effective? We know that for, especially when you talk about small businesses or even maybe a mid-sized growth business, cost could be a barrier of entry into this industrial base and into helping support the government as we look for more new innovative ideas within this area. So for any one of you three, if you want to lead us off, just give us your thoughts on cost effectiveness in this area.
Yeah, I'll be happy to start. So it goes without saying we've seen an explosion in innovation on the commercial side, and back to, I guess, paraphrasing what Jeremy said, the overriding philosophy is buying what we can and building what we have to, looking to commercial industry everywhere we possibly can, and then obviously continuing to build, I'll say, government unique systems, where we need to in order to meet the mission. But we do, certainly want to look to commercial everywhere we can. That's certainly true of kind of my office and what we buy on the remote sensing side. But even just looking across the NRO and speaking to that, there's a lot more that we leverage commercially. We leverage commercial launch, we leverage commercial cloud and compute, commercial components as well. So using commercial does mean a lot more in its truest sense than just buying commercial imagery, for example, as a service. And these partnerships, across the gamut are really integral to our success and our ability to move forward in an increasingly contested environment. Looking at the commercial remote sensing sector, though, a little bit more, I think a big part to make sure we do this cost effectively is on the commercial side, making sure that frankly the government isn't an anchor tenant, right? When we leverage commercial, we want to do that and be able to do that as a commercial customer. Ideally, as just another commercial customer. Asking a company to be able to provide imagery and provide a service to us, as well as frankly a variety of customers. That's how it's truly cost effective. If a company is only making I'll say unique capabilities tailored to only the United States government, frankly we do that all the time, and we know how to do that. We have a long history of doing that quite successfully. So, I think keeping that paradigm in mind. Not to say that there aren't exceptions and nuances to that. There always are. But as a general rule, we want to be able to look to a commercial company to operate commercially, and not just solely on behalf of the United States government. On the government side, though, there's a lot to that side of the equation also. In particular, our ability to actually leverage commercial as commercial and not insist on a lot of additional knobs and tweaks and other things to frankly turn them into government systems. That's a great way to squeeze a lot of cost effectiveness back out of a commercial offering. So making sure that we can leverage commercially, as Frank alluded to, making sure we do truly integrate that into the larger operational architecture, so we can make maximum use of all the commercial solutions that are available to us, both on the remote sensing side, the analytics side, making sure it really becomes part of our day-to-day business. But at the same time, making sure, we look to commercial appropriately, and frankly, where it doesn't necessarily meet all those needs, not be afraid of agilely moving forward on the government side as we continue to as well.
Great. I'll add to that. I think not being an anchor tenant. I'll just add to what Pete said and say not being an anchor tenant forever, I think, is the long-term goal. So I think for certain mission areas where we have to be at the beginning, understand that and buy the services or the products in a manner that allows a commercial market to emerge, and to know when to kind of get out of the way when it's appropriate. And I know we've been working a lot on marketplaces within the Space Force. We've worked on the Space Domain Awareness Marketplace that even the Office of Space Commerce is using to buy commercial data for their future track system. But that marketplace construct is really about lowering that barrier of entry, so new providers can quickly develop the APIs to get their data products in the hands of warfighters quickly, and also get them paid in a timely manner, and it doesn't take years to get them paid, and they also don't have to wait years to get a new contract. So keeping those contract timelines shorter, I think, is an important aspect to lowering that barrier of entry. So we don't let a 10-year contract and then someone's blocked out forever. That's not the way. That's not a good way to enable new entrants to onboard. And I know we're working on that SRT marketplace in conjunction with NRO and NGA for how we can buy those ISR products and use contracts from multiple agencies to kind of underpin those marketplaces, to enable those new entrants to try some stuff out, but then back to that tiered level. I think Pete talked about it in terms of cybersecurity, but just in terms of any capability, having a tiered hybrid space architecture structure of variable trust where folks can still come in and we can buy from them and they can make money quickly, but there's kind of a longer term carrot or benefit to be part of those longer term contracts with the NRO or NGA.
And finally, Frank, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I can add, from my perspective, the U.S. government benefits most when we can really share the capital costs in developing, whether it's a spacecraft, launching them and developing analytics and capabilities with the private sector. As you heard already from Pete and Jeremy, we want to be just one of the many customers for a capability so that we can benefit from the innovation in the commercial sector without being the sole supporter of that capability. A good example is our subscription, so analysis as a service, if you will, of one of INSA space services for monitoring oil tank inventories around the world. We started analyzing that capability early on when the company was developing back in 2016. And so while we supported the development of the service, we're just one of the many of their customers that use and value that kind of service and capability. I think along with financial customers, I think is another sector that uses that capability. So it's great when we can cooperate with partners, but then at the same time, that capability, we're just one of those subscribers to what they're able to provide. For me, one of the most exciting things about working with industry is really seeing how NGA can benefit from capabilities developed for commercial customers and the development community. We often see the capabilities or solutions that the geo industry has developed for one use case and figure out how do we apply that to some of the key intelligence questions that we're trying to address. In some cases, a totally different application that maybe was originally devised for when the developer created that solution. So, it's really collaborating with industry. As Jerry mentioned, we're looking at how can we cut down some of the barriers to entry. Putting contracts in place is sometimes one of the big challenges. And one of the things that NGA we're trying to do is really use a wide variety of acquisition instruments that are available to the government and really create a stable of contract vehicles available so we can be agile in how we put these solutions and how rapidly we can put these solutions on contracts. So whether it's a brand new kind of a niche solution or something that's established. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on quite a bit right now. Currently is creating that acquisition program and having the right kind of vehicles so we can be agile in getting those solutions on contract. One of the things that we've stood up about 2.5 years ago is something called that we call a bailment agreement. Again, an acquisition vehicle that's part of the FAR, but it's kind of a very low barrier to entry for a company to put this solution in front of us and us to be able to, if you will, kick the tires on the solution rather quickly, and that can help inform what do we want to do next. In some cases, evolve into maybe a greater partnership with industry to mature maybe that solution a little more through a cooperative research and development agreement, or in some cases go straight to contract because we saw the value the solution can bring to our mission needs, and we can see that this really fits some of the needs that we have. One of the things that we're also doing is really ensuring that we collaborate across the government, DIU, AFWorks, SpaceWorks. They're all making investments and looking at a lot of the solutions that we're all interested in. So in many instances, really collaborating or leveraging some of the investments that they've already made so we can get access and get exposure to the solutions to inform what do we want to do next. So, in this environment, it's really great to see the whole of government really coming together. We're all interested in the same or very similar solutions, and we're all looking at how can we be efficient in how we adopt, how we embrace, how we procure these kinds of solutions, to ensure that the government gets the most value out of the investments that we're making.
Yeah, that's some fantastic points, particularly when you're talking about the whole of government solution and the interagency piece to leverage some of these key technologies and processes that have already been invested in, that other agencies will be able to take advantage of. And now you have one enterprise, or the beginnings of enterprise solutions that can continue to be utilized by a variety of actors. So and you kind of led us right into an additional question on this. So Pete, I want to come back to you for a second on this, but what is being done to maintain the competitive advantage in the space domain? Because as we're already talking about some of the investments that Frank and Jeremy kind of laid out here, can you speak more or speak a little bit about the competitive advantage piece?
Yeah, absolutely. And the investments do make up a big part of that. A big part in particular, continuing to leverage commercial innovation everywhere we possibly can, right? To make sure that we can use those capabilities everywhere they're applicable, everywhere there's mission utility. And frankly, in the larger scheme, talking about the hybrid architecture of both government and commercial systems, making sure that then we can continue to use our government systems, our national systems, our classified systems to chase after the very hardest or most sensitive targets as well. Because in the end, it's all about meeting the mission. But back to leveraging commercial, there are a couple different ways that I think we need to continue to do that. Have done that. I think we've seen some successes there, and as always, there's always more to do. Part of that is, of course, setting out those kind of longer term demand signals and kind of stability in revenue to make sure U.S. industry is well poised to kind of maintain a leadership role on the world stage. But then, as Jeremy mentioned, the low barrier to entry is another key part of that. That's where a lot of the kind of fresh innovation comes in from new entrants, new phenomenologies, other aspects as well. Just talking about the commercial remote sensing side again. We have a program, as you likely know, called our Strategic Commercial Enhancements. It's something that we've been doing under a broad agency announcement paradigm to really be able to award contracts quickly to new entrants, new phenomenologies. It's been a pretty fast-paced thing. We're constantly looking at new areas to award contracts in. We've been able to use that very, very successfully, again, with a very low barrier to entry to award, I think it was 5 radar providers, 6 hyperspectral providers, 6 RF providers. And in particular, it's not just the low barrier to entry, but it's the ability and the contractual flexibility to scale that up. And, I don't want to say get past that valley, but really be able to scale that over time as frankly mission utility dictates, and as there is demonstrable value. Again, we saw that in spades over Ukraine, very successfully being able to scale up some of the collections that we were doing there to very, very good effect. So looking forward to obviously doing more there, and in particular relooking at the electro-optical side. Obviously we do have very large contracts underway there, but there's always new entrants. There's always new nuances and capability moving forward. So I believe we're hoping later this month to to put forward a new RFP, again, on the BAA side, to see what other new entrants there are on the electro-optical side, see where there's mission utility. Starting very low barrier to entry, not even necessarily even mandating satellites in orbit, but of course, when companies do have satellites in orbit and can get to that next level, being able to get our hands on orbit data to really measure mission utility, see, the quality that's there, and of course, most importantly, just use the data for, no kidding, warfighting, policy making, and intelligence needs as well.
Yes, someone wanted to add. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Well, first of all, yeah, it's a tough. The acquisition piece is pretty tough. So I know we just recently led a PLEO space-based services contract for a commercial SATCOM from our commercial SATCOM office, and it there's a lot of game-changing technology that's coming through in terms of satellite companies partnering with telecoms and the future of 5G networking, and how does the military play in some of that? So we're parsing through some of those gates. But back to what Frank was kind of alluding to, it's interesting when we buy the technology for a certain purpose, but it's even more interesting when you find out that there's all these other utilities that you maybe weren't part of the initial plan. It reminds me of Apollo 13. One of my favorite quotes, Ed Harris, is Gene Kranz, is like, I don't care what it was designed to do, I care what it can do. I mean, we definitely have that mindset, but at the same time, it's a lot easier if we don't try to MacGyver every solution, if we actually have some, definitive capabilities that we can depend on and know that they're going to be there when we need them. So, yeah, it's just a very interesting time. But in terms of the PLEO and the SATCOM piece, it's ever changing, right? So like the minute that we think we have a solution, the mindset traditionally that we have to build these acquisition strategies and just kind of, snap the chalk line and say they're good, like, those days are gone. Like, we have to be flexible even within the acquisitions that we have to be able to move in different directions, but still, again, provide that capability that we know the warfighter can depend on.
Absolutely. And Frank, I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to add anything to close us out here before I move on to a few of our audience Q&A questions.
No, thank you. Yeah, so, getting back to the question about competitive edge in the space domain. So while NGA doesn't actually conduct operations in space, we provide intelligence analysis and reporting. We embed analysts in space operations and serve as a combat support agency for military activities from the bottom of the ocean and out into space. So when you look at all those domains, we're always looking for solutions to support our requirements across all of that. To deter aggression against U.S. allied and partner interests in a manner that contributes to strategic stability, NGA strengthening, our ability to detect and attribute hostile acts, in space. Earlier, Pete mentioned sort of the framework, the tri-agency framework, and what the agencies have agreed to do as far as our roles and responsibilities. From an NGA perspective, we'll leverage new commercial space capabilities and services to meet national security requirements, and we'll deepen the integration of our space capabilities and activities with those of our allies and partner. And as space becomes increasingly contested domain, the importance of NGA support to space operations will only grow in the coming years. And to really get to the point of competitive advantage of our U.S. space industry, one of the things I'll like to highlight and give a shout out is just yesterday, our partners at NOAA and the Commercial Remote Sensing Regulatory Affairs Office released a notice of how the whole regulatory process of U.S. commercial imaging system has evolved and changed, where we now are trying to put our U.S. industries really to be competitive in that global remote sensing market that's out there today, and how we as a government have reduced the amount of time that it takes to issue those kinds of licenses from months to now just a matter of just a couple of weeks. So, we're really trying to put the policy in place to ensure that our industry, our U.S. industry, remains competitive in the really growing global market today.
You gentlemen have just given us a tremendous panel from the moderated side of this, and we're running a little short on time. But what I want to do is hit at least a couple of these audience questions, and thank you to the audience. You've provided what I call a plethora of a myriad of questions today. So a lot of excitement and engagement around this topic. So one, Pete, I know that, and to the audience, depending on the nature of the question, as I've spoken with our panelists, they may or may not be able to give as thorough of an answer as you want to, given the sensitive nature of the topic. But one thing, Pete, you mentioned a lot of was about the cybersecurity controls and how they relate back to threats. One of the questions we have here is, what are your thoughts on federal agencies' investments in enterprise or supported software versus open source or free software, as we're talking about some of the cybersecurity aspects of space resiliency?
Yeah, I know cybersecurity certainly, or I'm sorry, open source software definitely forms, a key component of a lot of the larger infrastructures of frankly, many IT, Silicon Valley, a lot of the new start companies that are coming out there. But obviously that's not exclusively the case. There's a lot of proprietary software in there as well, software you don't necessarily have all the exquisite insight into. It is a mix. I think the government, certainly as I've been exposed to, has a long history dealing with both proprietary and open source software. I think the controls are in place to look through that, but as everything, it's a risk management decision. I don't think you can include or exclude any particular component, but I think it's just something we have to continue to pay lots of attention to. But I think all sides will continue to be part of that larger IT ecosystem.
Fantastic, thank you. And I want to move on to at least one or two more to see if we can get some more answers here. So for Jeremy, for you, what commercial innovations are you most excited about that are being introduced to the mission and the future of the mission in space right now? Are there any that you can think of?
So I have the pleasure to actually work across almost every single mission area that the Space Force has. So even broader than some of the remote sensing stuff that the intelligence community is interested in. So I am very interested every single day, but I would say the mission area that kind of excites me the most is a combination of ISAM and rocket cargo, just because it's novel, interesting. So kind of like when we have on-orbit incidents where maybe satellites don't reach their intended destination, or they reach their intended destination and don't have their checkout go as planned. I always think in the back of my mind, wouldn't it be interesting if we had an entrepreneurial ISAM company who was willing to go out and save that satellite versus just writing it off to insurance every time. It's one thing to have the gas stations on orbit and that future infrastructure that will enable us to go back to the moon and beyond. But it's just, I just get really excited about all those different ideas, and especially when we talk to the companies who are actually putting their money where their mouth is and investing in this with or without us. I'm super hyped at that, and just I wish them all the success in the world.
Fantastic. All right, here's one last one for any of you that feel like you may have the ability to answer it. Do you feel that organizations currently have all the necessary authorities to effectively procure and test the emerging technologies that are increasingly critical to the space industry? I see you nodding your head. You want to take?
Yeah, I'll jump on this first. In a general sense, yes. I do think we have all the authorities and we need in order to move forward effectively. Whether or not we, frankly, across government consistently exercise those authorities and all the flexibility that offers, I think that's a different question. We can always do better. But from a fundamental authorities perspective, I think we have all the tools that we need in order to do so successfully.
Any other thoughts, Tom?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll add, I agree with what Pete said. We have the authorities. Many times it really sort of the risk balance of how we use the authorities, and in some cases just managing all of that. Sometimes we tend to use what has worked before when we have a lot more options available, that to stay within some of the authorities. But It's just doing the risk balance and what seems to work for the kinds of things that we need to go after. From an acquisition perspective, that's one of the areas, as I mentioned, the new acquisition program that we're trying to put in place is really ensure that we can use the broad set of vehicles that are available via the FAR today to ensure that we can be rapid in getting the solutions that we need at the speed that we need them. So in many instances, it's just sort of managing the risk of how do we use those authorities as we move on, to embrace industry and their innovation.
Fantastic.
I'll add to that really quick as well. I would say we have the authorities, but there's also just an interesting dynamic of, I've talked about PEOs being put between a rock and a hard place, where we tell them to go do these interesting things within a mission area, manage a mission area, but then we budget by programs. So, I'll just use alternate P&T, position, navigation, and timing as an example, versus like all the program elements are all underneath GPS. So are we telling the PEO to break the GPS program to go do alt P&T? So if it's not in the baseline, it's really tough for PEOs to make those, to actually manage those decisions, even with the authorities that they have. So it just behooves us to be as clear as possible for what we intend for these different budgeting elements, and to put PEOs in a position to succeed, to actually be able to manage a mission versus just program by program.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I want to give each of you just with a quick 30 seconds. Do you have any closing thoughts? This has been an absolutely dynamic and incredible discussion. We really appreciate your time, but I want to give you the opportunity if you have any closing thoughts. Start with you, Frank, and then we'll go to Pete and to Jeremy.
No, thank you. And again, just thank you for hosting and moderating this discussion. I think it's been very insightful. But, we value the partnership that we have with industry. I'm always amazed at the innovation that industry and how quickly they're evolving and creating some of the new solutions. So what we're trying to do is really drive unity of effort and transparency across our entire GEOINT enterprise by really managing collection and prioritization of requirements for commercial content, which includes a whole gamut of what's industry's offering today: commercial imagery, data products, analytic services. So our doors are open. We're very actively engaging industry to ensure we stay on top of what they're providing, what they're developing, and what's coming down next, so we can be better prepared to ensure that we can better utilize those solutions that are here today and they're coming in tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Pete?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on the panel. Space resilience is an incredibly important topic. As space gets more and more contested, we're seeing that every day. And again, not just on the government side, but the commercial side is seeing that as well. So as much as we're leaning forward, trying to leverage commercial everywhere we can, going back to the buy what we can, build what we must paradigm, I think, we've seen successes there. There's certainly more to do, especially bringing on new entrants, emerging providers, and all the innovation that brings to bear. It really is necessary for us to do that in order to really realize the kind of future capabilities that we have to enable on the government side to meet the mission. The mission is always getting harder, more demanding. Our adversaries are always making it more and more challenging, and we do need to leverage commercial for everywhere we possibly can, and U.S. domestic commercial in particular, to be able to meet that mission. And I do want to highlight that frankly, U.S. commercial space security, I think, is very important to U.S. space security more generally. And so, in many respects, the success of our commercial marketplace and our commercial providers is important to the larger national imperative. So, it's a great environment to be a part of, but it's a very important one, and one we take very, very seriously. Back to the team effort. None of us do this alone. It is a team effort, not only just across my agency, but across the interagency, and of course with our commercial partners as well.
Awesome.
Fantastic, Jeremy. Sorry, Jeremy.
No, it's all good. I echo what they said, but again, we're not just buying commercial for the sake of buying commercial. It's about speed of delivery and increasing that resiliency for the capabilities that we provide. So but at the same time, like what Frank talked about earlier, the policy paradigm, making it easier and more affable to U.S. industry growing. I think that's huge. A lot of the policy considerations that are being relooked at and changing on a much faster pace to ensure that, you know, we're not hamstringing our own industry is huge. But again, you know, it's multi-agency, and I'm just excited to see what the future holds. There's so many companies that I mean, I've met with over the past year, and there's even more that have popped up in that time frame. So I look forward to, you know, keeping our finger on the pulse of what industry is doing and maintaining this rhythm of industry engagement, so we can make better buy build decisions, not only as the Space Force, but as an interagency.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, gentlemen, again, so much for being a part of this panel. We greatly appreciate it, and thank you to the audience for joining us today. And I also lastly want to thank SCIC and Michael LaRoche for joining us and for sponsoring this event. Before we close out here, I just want to go over a few key things as we look to the future. We'll be continuing this conversation at the classified and unclassified level on September 6th through the 7th, when we host the Common Threads Colorado Space Resiliency and the Mission in Colorado Springs and Denver. So please look at our list of events, and we hope you'll be able to join us there. We will kick things off on September 6th in the Springs with a classified discussion with representatives, again, from NGA, from Space Force, and Lockheed Martin, and potentially others. Then on September 7th, we will hold an unclassified reception and keynote in Denver with the director of NSA Colorado, NSA CSS Colorado. And we're very excited for that programming as well with Jenna Seidel. And that will also include on our next additional programming. We're going to have our next virtual fireside chat this coming Thursday with the Admirals Bill and Mike Studeman, and they will be moderated by host Joan Dempsey. It is co-sponsored by our friends at FCIA, and this promises to be truly an incredible and insightful discussion on issues about national security strategy and strategic intelligence, the role of OSINT, something that is really gaining more prominence right now, and lessons learned from both of their careers, as well as a candid overall assessment of current and future threats. And then on Monday, August 14th, we will host a virtual discussion about alliances and partnerships with David Cattler, the Assistant Secretary for Intelligence and Security for NATO, and with Major General Michelle McGinnis, who is the Deputy Director for the Commonwealth Integration at DIA. And they're going to share insights on sharing cyber threat intelligence, the values of open source information, regional partnerships, and key lessons from Russia and the Ukrainian war, and much, much more. And then finally, we return to in-person events on August 17th for a breakfast and a panel discussion that is focused on open source intelligence, and that's going to take place here at Arlington at our INSA headquarters, the INSA Conference Center. And that's going to include former DIA Director, Lieutenant General retired Bob Ashley. He will moderate the discussion, with speakers from NGA, CIA, the Institute for the Study of War, Lincoln Labs, and Janes US. And you can find all of this information about our programming on the INSA website, www.insaonline.org. This concludes our programming. We thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll enjoy us again in the future, and please have a wonderful day.